Yeah, because I was, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I'm glad you come. I'm very sweetly surprised. All right, everybody. This clearly in typical journalistic fashion, we have the pyramid of. No, this is the other way around. The most important thing is happening here at the end. So thank you all for coming to the third hour, the 3-hour shindig. At the apex of this so-called circle is Larry Domash, who is my predecessor as a physicist at Hampshire College, and has had a remarkable, incredible career, starting with a PhD in physics at Princeton. And in the middle, he was with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi for many years, eventually rising to be the president of the Maharishi International University, all true. Never forgetting his laser physics, and he came to Hampshire with the most advanced possible laser setup that anyone could come. You remember him. He got to Hampshire early enough so that they could change the plans for one of the rooms in the basement to have an isolation concrete block that was separate from the rest of the foundation, which was what you needed to do the highest quality holography work when you came with this.
So it didn't jiggle.
Yeah, that's right. So when a truck goes by, the whole building jiggles.
Or
but
just
this
the
block
earth
doesn't.
itself
Or
is
the earth,
always
right.
wiggling around.
And eventually, and he could tell you more about the details in between, he came back to this area, first as a consultant, now as principal of some new company, and is working, again, in the area of optics at least, if not laser physics as well. And so I asked him to be the first one to kick off this circle of the kind of the final impact. You always ask, so what, when you're reading, so what, so what. This is what quantum mechanics has meant to me over the years. So those of you who are merely radiologists or whatever, you'll have to stretch if you want to get a hat, but Larry already got his.
So thanks for inviting me here. I haven't had a chance to be back in Hampshire in a long time. And I was actually here in the, not only the pre-Herb era, but it was the pre-Paleolithic era. It was actually before matter separated from radiation in the
Early Big Bang.
It was the first year or two of Hampshire. It was quite amazing. It was very chaotic, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I came to Hampshire wanting to do and what happened to me. But first I'll tell you a little bit of a story about Hampshire, is a very unusual environment, and I just understood today that actually even the meter is a little bit longer here than it is. The rest of the world thinks it's about 39.37 inches.
And I said
this is explained a lot when I understood that here it was 39.95. So this put a lot of things together for me. So before I tell you though about my time in Hampshire, I'll tell you the sort of the end of the story about Herb. There's sort of a cultural aspect to these things. And of course, when I was at Hampshire, I was a hippie professor and had long hair, and that was the only way. There were really hippies in those days.
But your long hair was in a ponytail.
Yeah, my long hair was in a ponytail. And it was a fiber bundle, actually. And Herb, when I first met him here, he was kind of a fairly straight guy, he looked the way a Jewish scientist was supposed to look, and was wearing a tweed jacket and was pretty trimmed up, and was wearing the academic uniform.
Just come from the Bluebirds?
Of that time. And then
Hudson's.
I went on to my further adventures and didn't see Herb until he was here, and next time I saw him was a couple of years later. By this time I was doing something else. I was running around the world. I was wearing suits and I had a haircut, and I saw Herb, and he walked in the room. He had a big afro and a black cape. And I sort of understood that physicists could exist in different eigenstates, which had a resonance, and they sort of periodically went back and forth between these modes. I went to I learned physics at a time when the theme of coherence was very much at the cutting edge. Coherent, the laser had been discovered in 1960. This is the 50th anniversary this year of the invention of the laser. A coherent state of light. And coherence also was sort of emerging as phenomena like superfluidity and superconductivity. And this was quantum mechanics, but it was quantum mechanics on a big scale. It wasn't quantum mechanics just for an atom, which makes us think it's kind of hidden away. But it was quantum mechanics that you could sort of see and feel. And the other thing that I was very interested in was education. It came from my undergraduate life at the University of Chicago, which was very focused on the structure of education and how education was to be put together. That was why I was attracted to Hampshire, because it was going to give an opportunity to begin on the founding of a new curriculum. And I was especially interested in quantum mechanics being so important, and it was such a rapid stage of expansion of understanding, was how it could be taught to everyone. It wasn't just for specialists. Such an incredible advance in human understanding that everybody really should know about it. So the question was how to actually do that. And Hampshire at the beginning, what was to be done at that time was definitely science for non-scientists. In the first year or two, we had relatively few students who identified themselves as wanting to go forward in sciences, but there was plenty of opportunity of science for non-scientists, and the theme of coherence or quantum mechanics writ large seemed to be sort of a good entry point to that. So some of the modules or early courses were organized that way around light. We built a laser over in that building over there, and superconductivity, superfluidity, and I have one of our students here. Doesn't seem to hurt her too much.
Nancy.
It's still, a sort of, it still is an unsolved problem about how quantum mechanics is taught, not to a small number of dedicated students in a small college, but how it can be a part of what everyone learns. It should be. It's revolutionized our view of the world, and as a matter of fact, in the past 40 years, the understanding of quantum mechanics has only gotten deeper, and some of the things that were mysterious at that time, I think at least, have become much more clear and even more amazing about what Einstein thought of as a proof that quantum mechanics was absurd has turned out to be sort of the handle on the way to really understand it. Personally, I also had other interests, and it really kind of came to coalesce with this. You might find it hard to believe that I got very interested in meditation because of quantum mechanics, but actually that's what happened. I came to Hampshire. I had learned a technique of meditation, transcendental meditation, in 1969 when I was a postdoc at Harvard, and I'd been practicing it, and I really liked it, and it had some. The people who taught at the Transcendental Meditation Organization, it didn't sound to me like they necessarily even knew really how it worked, but I liked practicing it. And we had a course at Hampshire called Science in Eastern Thought, where we compared the ideas of Western science and how things looked from other cultural perspectives. And as a matter of fact, meditation was a part of that course. It was probably the first course in the country where that kind of experience was part of the syllabus, part of the experience of the course. But I didn't see a way to, it was an effort to integrate, but I didn't see a way take it much further. In the summer after the first year of Hampshire, that is the summer of 1971, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was the guy who was making this kind of easy to learn, actually came here to Amherst. I would probably never have gone anywhere to learn more, but he actually came to Amherst. There was a course at UMass in the summer, and he was training teachers who would teach TM. So I was invited to that, and I got to hear Maharishi talk about this, which he had a unique way of doing. And he was very, very good at explaining it and abstracting it from its cultural roots in India. And I was listening to Maharishi, and my head was spinning with all this stuff about quantum coherence, because that's what I knew about, and that's what I was trying to use as a sort of a hook to teach physics to non-physicists. And I was listening to Maharishi talk about this, and he was talking about experience, and he was something called pure consciousness, which was consciousness without content, and how this experience would sort of occur in a way during meditation. And he described it as sort of a certain kind of expansion and the kind of feeling of coherence was there. And I listened to Maharishi, and it struck me, and I was being a researcher in this. It struck me that if a helium atom was able to talk, and it was undergoing the transition to a superfluidity, the temperature was doing that, this might be the way it would describe itself. And then I thought, holy shit, maybe it really is. Maybe there's something like that going on. And
No one asked him what he was smoking.
We didn't have to ask.
Yeah.
So I sort of had a feeling that, I think lots of scientists have this feeling at different points in their life that maybe if they're fortunate that they're in some situation where there's a combination of the data available and the understanding available, and they think that they just might be in a situation where nobody else is going to be able to quite understand what they're able to understand. So that kind of drew me in, and Maharishi also wanted to found another kind of university curriculum which would have meditation built into it, kind of a primary kind of keystone of the curriculum. And so I was drawn off in that direction, and did that for a number of years, and it was called Maharishi International University, and that's what Herb was referring to. And so that was a thumbnail sketch of kind of how quantum mechanics influenced my life in that time.
Thank you. I wonder if we could get Nancy to say something about the course.
The concept of science for non-science.
So you are.
Oh, I'm Nancy Bush, class of 70F. So
What do you do now in Chicago?
I do nothing related to science. I do build affordable housing in Chicago. So that was not my thing, but I had been discouraged from taking any science classes by my parents. So I did not have a big background in science when I came to the class. And I sort of was afraid of the idea of taking, chemistry 101, physics 101, or whatever you had to do to get there. And what was so great about this class was we were studying light, and we just dove in. And then you were so excited about it, you spent all your time, found a physics book, started reading Physics 101, to figure out what in the world was going on here. And it was just, a terrific experience. So I think that was a very successful concept.
That was a conscious method that we called the start in the middle method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very effective. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Should we keep on this theme? Anyone have? Bill? Sure.
You press
When the
pause.
talking stick comes.
Yeah, but we have the audio on
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, so I'm Bill Torcaso, 74 Fall, and I took, was it the first quantum mechanics for the myriad, for the million? No. Okay.
Oh, no, yeah, it might have changed its name around then.
Okay,
Basic physics, quantum mechanics had been given since spring of '72.
okay. All right, well, it was obviously new to me.
Yeah.
And with some of my then first-year friends who took it also, we sat in the room and we watched Herb do these wild dances on the whiteboard and draw these symbols and sort of assign them meaning. And the only explanation we could come up with was that the little dog Bloom was the physicist and you were just the front man.
That's great.
So, and telepathy was involved.
There had to be some telepathy.
I know.
This is the
Oh,
flyer
Bloom.
for the event and has a picture of
Yes.
Bloom.
Yes, Bloom was quite a sweet little dog.
If you kept your distance.
So, leaving aside the telepathy, in high school and the stuff I had done between high school and college, I was clearly sort of tracked into a technical career path, but high school physics was completely boring because you could watch the ball bounce and then you could do these measurements and then you could see the mathematics and everybody knew the answer at the start. And all you were doing was, it's just like doing, multiplication tables, try and come out with the right answer. And the same was true of chemistry in my high school experience until I got to an earth sciences teacher who basically taught on the Hampshire model. He would show us stuff, starting in the middle, I guess, and ask us questions about what was going on. And he would only answer yes or no questions that we asked him, so it was very much the modes of inquiry. And then I got here and hadn't really thought about physics and math, but then I took this quantum mechanics stuff and I saw that there's this, golden land beyond just, the physics and calculus of orbiting planets and bouncing balls and springs stretching up and so forth. And and one thing I remember about it in particular was that there was this notation that I'd never seen before. Is it Dirac notation?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was fascinating to me because it was so completely foreign, and yet it described this real stuff, and I was learning about this real stuff from you. And the one thing I took away and applied directly at Hampshire and thereafter was the notation of formal systems that I didn't already know. And I took modern algebra with David Kelly, I think the semester following, and felt like I had reached my limit in that I could not understand the algebra that was being taught there. And then I sort of veered off into software, which has its own, fairly rigorous formal systems, but somehow one that I can manage. But something about the content and the not the symbols as such, but the way in which there's a conversation between people, which is represented in that new way. That way that was new to me was very. It opened, my horizons, and that's what I remember, especially from quantum mechanics for the million. So, that's it for me.
Is there? I think some of you, many of you, have spoken about the quantum mechanics course and what it meant, and I'd like to open it a little bit wider because there are a number of students, former students, and people here who may have known me, may have known Hampshire in the early days, but didn't take the quantum mechanics class, who have other things to say about what went on subsequently with the same spirit as the spirit of innovation in the original quantum mechanics class. So if you have something to contribute at that point, or Mark, if you were in.
Yeah, I'll talk.
You were in.
Yeah, I took the course. In fact, I was in the same class, same year, 74. And my background was actually, I graduated high school in 3 years. I didn't like high school, so I wanted to get out of there. And I didn't take any physics or calculus in high school. So that was my background. but I really was inspired by the course, and so I decided I really want to go into physics, and I have gone into it since then. So I owe her a lot for that. And I will say he is the best teacher I ever had, and he's also by far the funniest teacher I ever had. In fact, when I was in the class, I would say I spent about half the time laughing. So it was very hard to pay attention as much as I'd want to, because I was just out of control laughing half the time at least. The only thing I can criticize her for is back then I wanted to continue on, and Herb went on sabbatical.
Oh.
And they didn't really have anyone after that. So Hampshire College went from being one of the best places to go to one of the worst, I think, for a little while Herb was gone. But I guess everyone needs a sabbatical once in a while. And just in terms of my career, when I look back at it, I realize a lot of my strengths and weaknesses go back to that class. Like, for example, I don't know, I find quantum mechanics, because of the way Herb explained it, not all that unintuitive. I mean, it's kind of intuitive, believe it or not. In fact, I feel like I understand quantum mechanics better than E&M. So, I don't know, he just did such a good job of explaining it with all these examples, simple 2x2 matrices, and the Braun-Ket notation. To this day, I understand that much better than the whole differential equation stuff. So when I look at my strengths and weaknesses, they seem to be the same as what I learned in that course. It's kind of surprising, but I think it's true. Like, one thing I've done in the past, and actually I just finished a new article on the Doppler effect, and I have to give him some of the credit for that also, because he has a real curiosity about these things, going to the root of it, and that's what I tried to do in the Doppler effect. I looked at the case where both the receiver and the source are moving, which it turned out I don't believe anyone ever did before, exactly, at least. So I was kind of surprised about that, but I think I was following in Herb's footsteps, really doing that, because he really tries to get to the root of the matter and figure it out. And then the last thing I'll say is one of my goals actually is, and I don't know if Herb has some thoughts on this or not, is to develop a course like the quantum mechanics course, but for special relativity, because I think that would be a real contribution to the
I think
whole
we had
country.
a course in special relativity the first year in Hampshire.
Really? Okay, but I haven't really seen
Yeah,
it.
the great thing about special relativity is that you really don't need very much beyond middle school algebra.
That's right, exactly. That's what's amazing. You don't really need calculus.
Yeah, you just need to bend your mind.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that would be a nice addition to the quantum mechanics.
Yeah, the notes
course.
for that are probably
Somewhere, yeah, you gotta go dig 'em out.
buried in the cellar someplace.
What color do you want?
I'll take blue.
Relatively.
It's red now.
It's coming at him. It's bluer.
It's gone away from me.
Oh. We read to him.
I would add a comment to that, just the same level, which is, there were these two great revolutions in physics, quantum mechanics, both mind-blowing, which is quantum mechanics, the nature of dynamics itself on a certain level, and the description of things on a certain level, and then relativity and just the nature of space and time. And the real truth is these 2 points of view have never been reconciled. It's the problem in some basic sense. And so if the goal is to infect people with problems, infecting them with both simultaneously is a really good idea. I think that can happen, just by confluence or by happenstance. But I think setting up the extreme dichotomy early is a really good thing. Though I'm not sure people could stand it in the sense of it creates such a profound kind of existential problem that if you really, the farther you get into it, the more you need to go on another sabbatical. kind of thing. So, but I want to second that motion.
Okay.
That's all.
And I'll have a comment about those last two remarks later, but I think Kim has something to say about how shocked he was to see me the first time I appeared at Hampshire Commons.
So I was in the class of 70, and I was one of those few people who came here actually interested in natural sciences. So I was one of the few people. I took Larry's course also. So I was asked to be the student on the faculty search committees. And I think I might have actually been in this room here that we met. And so they pull out this application, this guy who wants to come here in physics. And they say, yep, you know, here's his background, here's this about him. But he only wants a salary of $1. And the conversation was, you get what you pay for. If you're only paying the guy $1, you're not going to get much from this guy. And so we talked about it, we sort of debated back and forth what was his value. And finally they said, and his name is Herb Bernstein. And I said, you mean Herb from Brooklyn, Herb? They said, yeah, Herb from Brooklyn. So, very close friend of my brother's. And I said, I can vouch for this guy. I'm telling you, you'll get twice what you paid.
What color do you want?
Black.
Yeah, that was one of the great things about one of the things that was great when I went to all the natural science and math school meetings. I missed the meeting when I was going to be nominated to become a member, and then it never happened, and so I never actually got to be a member, which was disappointing. But so it goes. But one of the things that was wonderful about it was that they had there's a committee, there was a search committee, and then when they would try and find people, and then when they found people, they would interview them, and there was always students that were part of that really important process that were integrated into what had in every other place in the world, they were excluded from. It was like, this was talked about at the president's, when the former presidents were speaking, and present president, that was, who was it? It was somebody was saying, you should ask the 18-year-olds, what do they think about education, and instead of having a bunch of I think it was Greg Prince was saying this, that instead of a bunch of old fuddy-duddies saying, ruminating about what 18-year-olds want or need or should have, why the hell don't you go and get some of them and ask them and talk to them and find out, and so that was, I thought, amazing that and it was very effective, and we got great people. And I remember, I don't remember if I was actually on ever one of the committees or not. I may have been, but I remember certainly sitting in on the meetings, and they were wonderful, and we got great people. Who was the first chair?
Everett.
It was Everett.
Yes.
Because someone she didn't, the gal that spoke earlier had mentioned Lynn.
No, Lynn was.
And I always thought it was Frank Irvin, but
No, Frank
it
was
wasn't.
visiting faculty member.
Okay.
Everett faculty.
All right, so, and he ran the best school meetings. Unbelievable. Oh, God bless him.
You mean they were short?
No.
You already got a hat.
I'm not, I do wear many hats, but I don't need another.
You did or did
No,
not?
I don't need another. I have a hat.
Okay.
I wear many, but I don't.
I don't have a hat, so I thought I'd say something. As one of the other first-year students are interested in science, so. Oh, Michael, you don't. Somewhere it's in the bedroom somewhere. And I came here interested in physics and chemistry, biology and stuff, and got seduced away by those folks in language and communications before Herb showed up. And so I never learned about quantum mechanics, and I've spent probably the last 30 years reading books on quantum mechanics trying to understand it. So I'm probably have to re-enroll in Hampshire. So I can finally have
enroll for this too.
finally have Herb as a. But I have to tell you, the first time I met Herb, I was involved in the School of Natural Science too, but I don't think I was on the search committee for that particular thing then. But I used to hang around with a guy named Morgan Wesson, who was always filming stuff. And he had some idea that it'd be great, this new physics professor would shoot off a model rocket in the quad. And so he interviewed Herb, and Herb shot off it. And I think that's the first time I met you. And it was gas.
You guys were
No
on
pun
Intran or
intended.
something.
Yeah, we were doing like TV news stuff. And, so that's my only relationship to this group here, other than
What color do you want?
I'll take the last blue one.
Okay. Anyone else? Steve?
Well,
Larry again?
just thinking of listening, that the problem of teaching science for non-scientists in a broad context has never really been solved, and it's really a shame. There's some localized pockets like this one, but on a broader scale in American education, it's never been solved, and people come to the age where they're considered educated and they vote and so forth and know absolutely nothing about what scientists know about the world. And it's really a shame. And teaching science to non-scientists is very, it's liberating from a curriculum point of view, because you're not bound by all the things that people need to know to go into a professional career in science. And so the best ideas can be taught right up front. And that's what Herb, he seems to have been very successful in doing. And besides relativity, besides quantum mechanics, there's a third great revolution in the past 50 years, which is chaos, nonlinear dynamics, how structures emerge in the world. Incredibly important to understand about almost everything that happens, and only a few specialists in graduate school really ever get to understand this. It's too bad.
Tom wants to speak, but we have a process at the ISIS Institute seminars, and Tom will speak first, where we go around, and anyone who hasn't spoken before has a chance to either speak or not speak. It's not a coercive technique. It's a liberating technique. And we'll use that as the last go around. You could also be motivated perhaps by the desire for even though there are only two colors left. Tom's going to get one.
I want a hat and I don't want a hat at the same time.
With
there you
the
go.
square root of a half for each. You'll notice the hats, I thought I might explain that now. Say quantum mechanics, square root of probably perfect. Because quantum mechanics deals, especially in the formalism that we've been talking about, with the square root of the probability. And there's debate as to whether it's perfectly correct.
Well, I'm Tom Roper. I've never gone to Hampshire. I teach linguistics at UMass. I've known her for an awful long time. I don't know.
When did you start at UMass?
1973.
That's how long?
Oh, you started here then?
No, 71.
71, oh, let's see. And I guess I'm distinguished, and I have absolutely no doubt that I did flunk physics. I have no question about it at Reed, where Mary Jane teaches. And so then I came in contact with it again with my best friend Dave Griffiths, who taught here. And I taught at University of Chicago. I was wondering if I was there when you were there. But then I figured out, well, I was at Harvard in 1969, and so was Dave. Did you know Dave Griffiths there? So he was there. And then he came here, and I think did very well in physics and ended up at Reed. And so everything was indirect, because I had flunked physics, right? So I was still a little curious about it. Because I tried to take the course without knowing anything about calculus. And Dave kept telling me these interesting things. Like, for instance, he said, nobody has solved the action at distance problem. And it was it's still true. And I said, but what it was to me was that scientists could manipulate things they didn't really understand. And that was a really important notion. I'm still doing it, by the way. I'm trying to understand the notion of propositionality and the difference between the sentence. Can you play baseball? And you can't play baseball, can you? That's the difference, right? And I don't know, and nobody knows what a proposition is, but I'm manipulating the idea anyway. It's based on those notions, and so I learned a lot from that. And then, of course, I was kind of I lived with Dave here too, and he was teaching in Hampshire. So I was always hearing about these things indirectly. And it did have an impact, and your remarks made me feel like I wanted to say something. Because one thing that Herb has been an inspiration for, and ISIS has always been an inspiration for, is simply the idea that people are whole human beings and that everything they know contributes to who they are. And particularly in scientific questions. And I very much try to teach that way when I teach linguistics. I say, when you take this class, you should come out as a different human being. That's what humanistic education is supposed to be. And there's very little support for that in the larger intellectual world, and if you're largely involved with graduate students, as I am, it drifts away. So in my mind, and for me, Herb and the ISIS Institute has always been an implicit support for the way I wanted to teach. And although this is very far from physics, it is still a genuine way in which the kind of work done in this class and this school has been an inspiration for me.
Thank you. Thank you. I forgot almost that if you get a hat, you have to get one of these hands.
Where's the ecological sphere? Can't you just transfer it to my phone?
So we're going to go around, and people who haven't spoken before can say who they are. And
I'd love to.
And speak. Go ahead.
I'm Joseph Alpern. I recently departed from Hampshire just 2-3 years ago now. Went over to do the European thing for a little bit. But one of my most favorite memories, and one of the things that stuck with me the most during my time here, was the Boehm Dialogue, the 3 hours once a month I would spend in a room just like this, with similar people to yourselves, but I must say that on the occasion of the 40th, we are up in the ante here with a great presence, which I really appreciate for someone my age, just to be here. So, 3 hours, once a month, we would sit around just as we are now. And during those hours, it was the greatest and most amazing thing that I experienced, and Herb led that. And I have to thank him right now for that. So thank you, Herb.
You're welcome, but there are no leaders. I convened it, but go ahead.
Convened, pardon me. Absolutely. I have to remember all that jargon. What was proprioception? Is that right?
Proprioception.
Proprioception. So, yeah, I can say that to me, that was something that looked at the way scientists communicate with one another. And I think that's something that's so overlooked. And, you know, we're all so specialized, and yet we're all people living the same experiences and communicating on a daily basis in different capacities. And to me, that was a memory, the fondest memory, if I could say, of my academic side of Hampshire, of course. We all know the 80-20 or whatever ratio you chose to live. But yeah, I'm so excited that I got a chance to speak just now.
Great. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Beth Nelson, class of 77, and I studied linguistics. I didn't do any of this, but I have a son who's starting at UNH in the fall, physics major, so I was kind of curious, and also it's a chance to get up here and just fun to listen in, that's all.
Steve?
Sure. So, I'm Stephen Banish. I entered 76 in the fall. I was here for 2 years, took 2 years off, and came back for 2 years. And while I was out, I helped a friend of mine design and build an experimental solar house, and came back to Hampshire because I had figured out something I wanted to do for Div 3, which was to design a computer-based system to monitor and help me analyze the performance of that house. And the house worked reasonably well, but it wasn't economically designed. There were certainly ways of building a house which would get the same effect a lot cheaper. One of the things that I'm sure Hampshire helped with and I think it's been very helpful, is the ability to keep multiple, not quite contradictory, but models that have contradictions, in my head at the same time, and to be able to move forward with those kinds of models, and maybe more than two. And I found that very helpful. And I've also found it actually very unusual in other people. One of the things I've been dealing with recently, we hired a new president at the company I work for. I've been working at the Concord Consortium. We do basically projects on science education. A lot of it's funded from the National Science Foundation. We just, a year ago, hired a new president. And this is a really interesting problem. We were looking at a bunch of different candidates, and I was quite worried about the candidates. They were good, but there was something missing. And I've been working with a guy named Bob Tinker for a number of years, and I realized finally what it was is we were able to do design in our imaginations. In other words, I was able to design something that didn't exist and describe it to him, and it appeared in his head, and he could do things with it and actually make changes in it and share it back with me. And there's so much importance about creating things that don't exist. And I find that there's a lot of people who can move forward once they are playing with it, but it was very rare to find somebody who I could do this with in our heads. And that was very satisfying. So, and speaking of science education, I think one of the key things that people don't get is the value of deep skepticism. I think that's very foreign to how most people interact with the world around them. And that's sort of an edge of how do I help promote that now in the work we're doing. I think most people think of that kind of deep skepticism. Not only is it foreign, but it's very stressful.
It's very scary to people.
It is very scary.
Change is scary.
And it's very useful.
Yeah, we're just about at the limit of 3 o'clock.
Thanks.
You want the hat? Take the paper.
Okay. Lots of papers.
There's one more person too, maybe. Paul?
Oh, sure.
But there are no more hats, so.
That's okay. My name's Paul, fall 83, and very happy to be here. Didn't get a chance to take a class with her, but I always wanted to, so this is what I get. And I picked up the word imagine, did you say?
Imagination. Yes, to imagine things that don't exist.
Hampshire kind of set me on a path where I've been reconciling the needs of the imagination, or the longings of the imagination, with a life in reality. And I actually went to a school out in California called the Institute of Imaginal Studies, which is a school for psychology. And its perspective on science was quite interesting. It looked at science and asked how science looked at itself, in terms of could it subtract itself from the equation of what was happening in any kind of experiment? Could it imagine itself not being there? In other words, could the scientist really come up with anything that was true without accounting for their own presence? And this whole thing about absence and presence and things that are matter, things that are not matter at the same time, is why I'm here.
And not quantum, right?
It's quantum. I mean, whether the observer is part of the experiment.
Yeah.
The heart of quantum. Yeah. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for participating. Thank you. And it's 3 o'clock.
So we're done.